All right, welcome in, everybody. Good afternoon to you. It is the Baseline View, our live pregame show, an hour before Mizzou and Texas Christian University. Tip-off at 1 o'clock this afternoon on ESPNU, part of the Big 12 SEC Challenge, an event that you might not be very used to playing in because Missouri didn't get to play in it for a long time. They do get to play in it this year. I think they played in it last year too. Actually, it's done a couple years at a time, and it's done by average finish. Obviously, there were a few years there where Missouri's average finish wasn't very good. The Big 12, as only makes perfect sense, has 9 teams. 10 teams maybe. I've kind of lost track of how many teams the Big 12 has. I think it's 10. But so only 10 SEC teams can play in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. That leaves 4 out every year. This year, I know Ole Miss, Georgia, Vandy, and South Carolina are left out based on the results from sometime in the past. Missouri plays TCU. It is a team that, I don't know, frankly, isn't all that inspiring. This is kind of a weird game. It's a non-conference game, in the middle of January, when you're not used to having non-conference games. Obviously, that's when this event is set up for. There are 10 games across both conferences. And it is a game that, I don't know, at one point it looked like, hey, TCU maybe coming on under Jamie Dixon. Maybe this one will be interesting. TCU is now 9-6, 2-5 in the Big 12. TCU started off the season okay. Beat a decent Tulsa team in the second game of the year. Beat Liberty in the third game. And if Missouri fans remember, Liberty gave Mizzou a run for its money for a little while. Missouri ended up winning that game, but, Liberty played all right and has beaten a couple of SEC teams. I believe it was Mississippi State and South Carolina are the two they've beaten. Could have been A&M in there, but either way, Liberty's won a couple of games against power conference opponents. TCU beat them, then beat Northwestern State to go to 4-0. Lost the Big 12 opener against Oklahoma by 4 points. No shame in that. OU's a ranked team. Actually, right now leads Alabama at halftime. Lost by 9 to Providence. No real shame in that. And then TCU ran off 4 more in a row. They were 8-2 after. 5 more in a row. They were 9-2 after wins over Texas A&M, Oklahoma State, North Dakota State, Prairie View, and Kansas State. Here is what TCU has done since then. 29-point loss to Kansas, 18-point loss to Baylor, 36-point loss to Oklahoma, postponed against West Virginia, postponed against Texas Tech, postponed against Texas, and 8-point loss to Kansas. So in the last 7 games it was supposed to play, TCU had 3 canceled postponed due to COVID and lost 3 of them by at least 18 points. It's not a team that comes in with much momentum. It's not a game that's going to help Missouri's resume a ton. It is a game Missouri absolutely should and needs to win. If Missouri doesn't win this game, look, it doesn't mean the season's over and they're not making the tournament and any of that, but it is certainly a disappointing day if Missouri can't win this. Welcome into to Bo and the rest of you that are here. Alabama is legit. That is all. I agree. They're not playing very well right now. Down 32-29 at halftime to Oklahoma. What I'm actually going to do is start scrolling the SEC scores across the scoreboard. There at the bottom. There's only a couple of games in action. Oklahoma and Alabama have gotten started. Texas A&M and Kansas State have gotten started in a game that not even fans of those teams should be watching. They should be watching Oklahoma and Alabama while A&M and Kansas State toil in complete anonymity. Neither of those teams is any good. Both has an excellent chance to finish last in its league. We will talk no more about that game, I promise. Texas Tech, LSU, Florida, West Virginia start at the same time Missouri does. Auburn and Baylor, Arkansas and Oklahoma State start a little bit later. Probably the headliner in this thing is Kansas and Tennessee. That's this evening at 5. Well, Alabama and Ole Miss actually may be the headliner now. Or I'm sorry, Alabama and Oklahoma, not Ole Miss. Kansas, Tennessee is a good game. Then you got those couple regular SEC games, Iowa State at Mississippi State. Nobody should talk about Texas at Kentucky postponed. Why is that a big deal? because Kentucky is supposed to come to Columbia on Tuesday night, and Missouri is supposed to play the Wildcats. It's the only time they play this year. It's supposed to be a home game for Missouri. That game most definitely is in question right now. Kentucky went yesterday on what it called a 48-hour pause. Basically, that meant the Texas game definitely wasn't happening. They're going to reassess, I would assume, at some point tomorrow. That came out mid-afternoon, early evening yesterday, that Kentucky wasn't going to be able to play today. And so I would assume by mid-afternoon tomorrow, we're going to have some idea if they can play on Tuesday. I don't know. Nobody really knows. But certainly it's in question whether Kentucky's going to be able to play here. So big game for Missouri today. And Adam asked, why do we always get a bad matchup in the Big 12 SEC Challenge? And you're right, Adam, they do. A big part of it is simply that Missouri hasn't been very good lately. They've finished in the bottom part of the standings, and it looks to me like they generally try to match up teams that in the past couple years have been pretty equal, right? Tennessee's been the best team in the SEC over the last 2 years. Kansas, the best team in the Big 12. So those two teams are playing. Texas Tech and LSU have been near the tops of their leagues. Florida and West Virginia have been in the upper third of their leagues. Auburn and Baylor have been right there as some of the better teams in the leagues. Alabama and Oklahoma have finished in similar positions, kind of middle-tier teams that have both actually risen up this year. Missouri and TCU have both been kind of lower half to lower third teams in the standings. Let's say TCU over the last couple of years, I don't know, I'm going to take a guess, has been the number 8 or 9 team in the Big 12. Well, that's probably about where Missouri's been in the SEC if you include that 2017 season that bumps up their standing a little bit. And this is still based, I think, largely off standings from 2017 and 2018, Konzo's first 2 years. So that's why it is. I mean, they're getting teams that are similarly ranked in the Big 12. And the Big 12 is, let's be honest, a better league than the SEC. It is tough to rise up in that league. Near the top, you've got Baylor, you've got Kansas, you've got Texas Tech. Those have been, and you've got West Virginia. Those have been, I would say, 4 of the top 20 programs in the country over the last few years. Oklahoma is, capable of being good. Texas is really good this year. So there's a lot of good teams in that league, and it just so happens that you get down to 8th, 9th, 10th, those generally aren't good teams, and that's who Missouri's been playing the last couple of years. We all know, it'd be great to see Missouri-Kansas, especially this year, but that didn't make any sense with the way they've always done it. And also, Missouri and Kansas were supposed to originally play this year, obviously haven't. Missouri has played. Let's see. Now, today they're playing TCU, which I don't exactly count as a former Big 12 team because they weren't in the Big 12 when Missouri was. Same with West Virginia, but they've played West Virginia in the past. They played Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure they played Oklahoma State. They've played Kansas State, I know. They've played Iowa State, played Iowa State in that opener, in 2017 with the Porters. So the only teams in the Big 12, I think at this point they haven't played are Texas Tech, since leaving the Big 12. Texas Tech, and Kansas, I think, are the only teams they haven't played from the former league. That will change again next year when that Mizzou-Kansas series starts, and it'll just be at that point, I think, Texas Tech, and Baylor. I'm sorry. So Texas Tech, Baylor, and Kansas are the 4 teams they haven't played, whether it's in this tournament, another tournament, or just a regularly scheduled regular season game. Bo brings up a point. John Chaney, great Temple coach, passed away a couple days ago, maybe even yesterday. I think yesterday morning the news came out, but said, didn't Mizzou win the Big 8 tournament one year and had to play John Chaney's Temple Owls in the first round? That is correct. I actually saw this question before we came on the air, so I went back and looked. Missouri was a 10 seed in the 1993 NCAA tournament. Temple was the 7 seed. In that game, Eddie Jones for Temple, I'm sure you'll remember that name, 24 points, 8 rebounds. Aaron McKee for Temple, 24 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists. Rick Brunson for Temple, 14 points, 5 steals, 3 assists. Those 3 guys scored 62 of Temple's 75 points. Some guy named Derek Battle scored 8, and Jason Ivey scored 5. For Missouri in that game, leading scorers, Melvin Booker with 13 points, also 7 turnovers. Javon Crudup with 13 points. Chris Heller with 12, and Mark Atkins with 17 off the bench. Obviously, the Temple went on in that next game to beat Santa Clara, which I'm assuming was a 15 seed that had, I think that was the Steve Nash team that beat Arizona in the first round. It was the first 15 seed. I think, could be wrong on this, but I think the first 15 seed to win a game, that Santa Clara team. And then Temple ended that Santa Clara season in the next round, and would then go on to beat Vanderbilt in the Sweet 16, which had upset a number 1 seed somewhere along the way, and then lost to Michigan, the Fab 5 team, in the regional final. 77-72, the Fab 5 team beat Temple. So that was a nice flashback to NCAA tournaments past. The following year is the year Missouri would go undefeated in the Big 8 and make an Elite 8 of its own before losing to Arizona. So, yeah, Bo, thanks for the trip down memory lane to start. Cody is excited about the Cardinals getting Nolan Arenado. That is the big topic on our message board, certainly more so than this game. So, yeah, understand why Cardinal fans would be happy. I don't know what I just did there. Let's see if I am able to reset this. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened there. Kind of messed up the background. So, yeah, I tell you what we're going to do, actually, while I'm trying to figure that out, because I randomly just scrolled and hit a button. But always during this show, we let you guys hear from some of the players, some of the people involved. So we're going to do that right now while I get my screen back up and going. And we're going to start with Jeremiah Tillman, who we talked to yesterday morning.
Hey, I'm just curious what the mindset of the group is right now heading into the next game.
I mean, continue to do what we do as far as like playing hard. I mean, of course, we lost last game, but we just gotta embrace what's the goal is and just move on to the next thing for real.
Jack?
Hey, Jeremiah. So it was reported that Coach Martin took the team to the Equal Justice Initiative Lynching Memorial, the Legacy Museum, and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery during the road trip. How did those trips go, and what did the team kind of get out of them?
It was a great experience. It was like we all grew that day. I mean, of course, we didn't really know too much about everything that happened on back there. But like for us to see it in person and just see what was going on in those videos and like hearing those stories, it was very awakening.
Dave?
Jeremiah, what were the lessons learned from the Auburn loss? Like, what would you take away from there that you guys need to fix?
We can't come out slow. We can't come out thinking we're gonna win no game and thinking somebody gonna like let us win just because, you know what I'm saying, we've been doing good in the past couple of games. So we just gotta continue to like just throw the first punch and the last.
Good.
Jeremiah, a couple times in the last few games you've set career high in block shots. I think you ended up with 6 or 7 against Auburn. What is that something that the coach has really stressed coming into this year? And what's the difference in the ability to do that this year versus maybe the last couple of years?
Honestly, I didn't even realize that I had 6 blocks that game. I was just playing for real. Like they emphasized me rebounding. I mean, of course, people, they want me to block shots, but they emphasize me rebounding and stuff like that. But, I mean, me playing hard, I guess that's what it leads up to.
Mitch?
Jeremiah, I know that free throw shooting maybe wasn't what you had hoped last game. I guess what's your approach afterwards? How do you kind of go about putting that behind you?
Just continue to work on them. I got in the gym and shot some free throws. I stayed to my routine, and they just weren't falling for me that night. So I just got to move past it. That's all, for real.
Eric?
Jeremiah, obviously, just watching from Tuesday's game, it seemed like it was two different games when Sharif Cooper was not on the court compared to when he was with his athleticism. Is stopping a guy like that on the entire team or just the guards? Because if you guys have a successful season, you think you're going to run into a guy like that again.
I mean, yeah, we're going to run into a guy like that again, of course, but it's just us. That was all us out there as far as our defensive principles. We was letting them get to the rim. We was letting them get to the middle a lot, and that's just on us. We got to just stop them up high and make sure we doing what we do, what we know for the scout report and all stuff like that. So, I mean, that's really on us as far as the defensive wise and that ball screen.
Colin?
Jeremiah, you mentioned TCU briefly. Just what's the challenge with them? I know they've lost 4 straight, but coming off a pause.
I mean, we gonna do what we do as far as Mizzou basketball. It's just another game in front of us. I know it's like the Big 12, Big 10, 12 thing. But yeah, I mean, for real, we just stick to our principles and just play hard, and we watch film and see what's going on with them. And we coming off a loss, so I mean, we gonna have some fire on our fuel on our fire, as you said.
Mason?
Hey, Jeremiah, just looking at this TCU team, what do you think is the biggest thing that you need to contain with them tomorrow?
Like I just said, for real, just stick to our principles, just playing hard. As long as we throw the first punch and throw the last, I feel like everything should be okay when it comes to the game. I mean, we're going to always go out there and play hard. And if it's going to be a dogfight, it's going to be a dogfight. We just got to finish the game, complete the game.
All right, so Jeremiah Tillman, and I think we now have officially reached the point, and I am in the midst of trying to get this background fixed, guys. I apologize for that, but sometimes you just accidentally hit a button and it messes things up, and when you're live, you've got to fix that live. So I am in the process of getting it fixed, but anyway, we have reached a point, as you heard, where Missouri players no longer know what conference Missouri used to play in, right? It now is, I don't know, that Big 12, Big 10 thing, according to Jeremiah Tillman. So, hey, that's all right. It's been 9 years. Jeremiah Tillman was, probably 13 when Missouri was in the Big 12, so no shame in not knowing that. But I think you could also tell we talked to him, I think probably before they had drilled down very deep on TCU. I think they probably were doing that during the day yesterday. But the truth is, there's not a lot that stands out about this TCU team. It's 9-6, hadn't had a decent win in well over a month. They got a couple individuals. R.J. Nembhard can obviously put up some points. Kevin Samuel averaging almost over 9 rebounds a game, almost a double-double. Might be an interesting matchup with Tillman there, but and I just realized that our graphic says that is Auburn. Obviously, that is not Auburn. Sometimes you reuse graphics. Missouri plays TCU today. But this is just a game Missouri should win. As far as the rest of the season goes, this is one of the least suspenseful matchups on the season. It needs to be for Missouri. It would be nice to have one that, hey, there's not a ton of suspense. And there really wasn't a ton in the game against Tennessee last weekend, but that's a little bit different feeling than this one, especially going in. You expect this to maybe be able to coast a little bit more than you have in some games. Ed, appreciate Ed joining us. He's asking about 2/3 of the way through the season, how does this team look compared to what you thought preseason? And I'm trying to, are we really already about 2/3 of the way through the season? I guess we are. Missouri's played 13 games, so not 2/3 calendar-wise, I think, but not games-wise, because Missouri's lost 2 and may lose the third one and all that. Closer to probably halfway through the regular season total number of games-wise. They're better than I thought. I know there were optimistic people in the preseason, and those people are turning out to certainly be closer to right than I was. I thought this was a team that would be, I mean, if they played, what are we looking at? Probably 27 6 games, I thought it was a team that was probably somewhere around like 15-11. Maybe upside was going to be like 18-8 and get into the tournament as a 6 or a 7 seed. I thought that was the ceiling for this team. Obviously, at this point, the ceiling is higher. The floor for your expectations as of now should be about a 6 or a 7 seed, I think. It could slip lower, but it would mean Missouri collapsed in the second half of the season was certainly disappointing. So, yeah, they're better than I thought they'd be. There is no question about that. They've played really well. I think most of the bracket prediction or projections have them as a 3 or a 4 seed. Now, those things are worthless because let me see, Missouri's got, 11, 12 games left in the regular season. So those don't mean anything right now. But it gives you kind of an idea of where they stand. And where they stand, certainly Missouri has been better than I thought. Specifically, the areas they've been better. Look, Jeremiah Tillman's been much better. 12.5 points, 8 rebounds a game. He has played now about 5 or 6 really nice games in a row. He has played very well. He has become maybe the most consistent player on this team. The defense has really kind of found itself in the last handful of games, and coming off Auburn, probably not the best time to say that, but since SEC play started, they've really played good defense, and probably going even back to that Bradley game that they won 54-53, where they're not as good as expected. They can't shoot still from outside, and maybe we should have expected that, but I think all of us looked at last year's team and said, this is just it's a bump in the road. Obviously, it's not ideal, but I think this is a team that shoots the ball better than this, right? No, this is just how they shoot the ball. 28-ish%, I think, from three-point range, which was and I'm checking to see if that number is actually still accurate. But Missouri last year was just under 29%. They were just under 30. I'm sorry. They were 29.7 for the season last year, which was dreadful as far as national rankings. And this year they are 28.6, which is 316th in the country. Now, the odd part is Missouri's opponents are also shooting 28.6% from three-point range, which is the 21st worst mark in college basketball. Ken Pom has this game 73-64 Missouri. To give you an idea what that means, there's only one other game that Missouri is projected to win the rest of the season by Ken Pom by this many points, and that is 70-59 against Texas A&M at home. You guys have seen Texas A&M. You know how bad Texas A&M is. TCU is thought to be about 2 points better than them. Ken Pom gives Missouri an 80% chance to win this game. Then obviously you got Kentucky coming up Tuesday, maybe Alabama at home Saturday. So it's a big week for Missouri. These next two are games Missouri needs to win. Now, that Alabama game would be a big boost for your resume, but here's what I think the Auburn loss did. I think the Auburn loss means they cannot win the league. Alabama's going to win the SEC because Alabama now has a 3-game lead on everybody. The only way, really, I see Missouri catching them is Missouri could maybe lose one more, but most likely has to go unbeaten the rest of the way and have Alabama lose 3 times, including at Missouri. So realistically, this league's over. Alabama's going to win the regular season title, be the number 1 seed going into the conference tournaments, which we can talk about in a minute. And Missouri is probably fighting with teams like LSU, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Florida for that second seed in one of those first-round buys. I think that's where things stand right now. So, hey, now going to take a minute and let you hear from another one of the players that we talked to yesterday. Spoke with Javon Pickett for a few minutes, and let you hear from Javon. Come back, talk a little bit more about this week and the postseason and kind of what the rest of this year in college basketball holds.
Javon, coming out of the Auburn game, what's the lesson to learn, or what's the takeaway of what you guys need to fix going forward?
We watched film yesterday and just seen like layups we missed around the basket. Just making sure that we concentrate more on finishing, feeding the ball in to Jeremiah a little bit more, he's doing a tremendous job right now. So just making sure we steady throwing it in to him, and then just got to stay poised. We got to make sure that we starting strong from the jump. We kind of started off a little sluggish at first and then picked it up. We just got to play a full 40 minutes, just with head of steam, being calm, being cool, collected.
Colin?
Yeah, Javon, I was going to kind of ask about finishing. It seems like there's been a couple games where other teams have had some block shots on you guys. Is that a focus thing, like you mentioned, with hitting layups, or is it something else?
I feel like we're doing a great job of getting there. We just, sometimes, coach tell us jump stop, shot fake, and then just go up through them. So we just got to do that sometimes. But sometimes, they get drives and then the guy just come up from behind or something like that and be able to contest it. But, it have been plenty of times where we didn't made those type of shots. So just steady attacking. They're going to fall for us.
Gabe?
Javon, you've played with and against Jeremiah for a long time now. Why this last month has he become so much more consistent? What have you seen in his game that's allowed this jump he's made this year?
He been focused a lot. He has good energy. He in a good space. Jeremiah's doing a tremendous job of getting in, making sure that he being very serious about everything he doing. In practice, he being very vocal, being a great leader. And so I feel like that's just going into the game and he focusing on his target while he in the game, playing as hard as he can. And that's just rewarding on both ends. He's doing a great job of defending, rebounding. And so that's just leading to the offensive end. And he doing this thing. Jeremiah's a beast. So.
Jack?
Javon, I asked Jeremiah this too, but you guys went to the Equal Justice Initiative Lynching Memorial, the Legacy Museum, and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama. On the road trip, how were those experiences, and what did you guys learn from them?
That was a great experience. Just seeing all those different type of stories. I feel like we talked about that stuff a lot over the summer. And to actually go see it, experience it with one another, it was great. I feel like that just keep building us a bigger bond, everybody learning stuff together, and so we learned a lot about like the injustice systems or whatever, prisons, about all the lynching that went on. And so, it was just a great time for us to even come together and just learn a little bit more.
Sweetie?
Hey, Javon, you guys have just been on the road a ton, just between the COVID pause, kind of, postponing 2 home games. Just with this upcoming stretch of, I believe, like 3 straight home games, have you guys talked about just kind of capitalizing on that and using that potentially as momentum?
We just going out there every day to compete, fight, go out there and try to win. It starts in practice, making sure that we're focused in practice. A lot of guys, we're in a good space. Even though we lost the last game, a lot of guys are ready to bounce back. Going to our game tomorrow and the next games, going there with a positive attitude, do whatever we have to do to win.
Colin?
Yeah, Javon, I know Auburn's free throws were a topic of discussion after that game, but how do you feel like you guys have been doing on the offensive end, getting to the foul line and drawing fouls and getting easy shots at the foul line?
We could probably get there a little bit more. And then just be more efficient when we do get there. But we could probably get there a little bit more. Just keep attacking, keep driving. We could probably get there a couple, like 4 or 5 more times throughout the game. We got a lot of great drivers on the team. So just get there and then knock those down.
So interesting talking about what Javon Pickett finished talking there about, which is free throw shooting. I think a lot of you guys probably don't realize this. Missouri is leading the SEC in free throw attempts per game. I know coming off the Auburn game where Sharif Cooper lived there and went 18 for 21 is a sensitive time to talk about this subject. But Missouri gets to the free throw line plenty. It is not a season-long conspiracy to call fouls against Missouri and not against the opponent. They lead the league in free throw attempts. They probably, like Javon said, could take a few more because I think they probably need to drive a little more and shoot a little less from outside. In that game at Tennessee that they won, which I think is fair to say it's the most complete effort they put together this season, they only attempted 13 3-pointers. I think that's a pretty good target number. I think the last time out, I think the Auburn game was like 22. And give Bruce Pearl some credit. He threw a matchup zone, a 2-3 zone in there at times, and probably made it more difficult to get the ball to Tillman. So not everything has to run through Tillman, but you do probably, I think, have to abandon some of the outside shots. Mitchell Smith and Kobe Brown both took 3 in the first half against Auburn, and it's just not a recipe for success for this team. T-Rise fired up for the game. Appreciate you joining us, man. I know you're here with us a lot. Jared says, got to go 1-1 next week if Kentucky is able to play. I'm assuming next week means not including today's game. Today's game has to be a win, period. I mean, this is a game that, TCU is, they're not all that good. I mean, I don't know how many other ways to say it. And I think this is a game that Missouri fans are looking at and saying, yeah, this is just kind of one of those. I mean, in KenPom rankings, they're 93rd. The only teams that Missouri faces the rest of this season that are lower than that, Georgia at 98, Texas A&M at 125. If they eventually do get to make up the Vanderbilt game, Vanderbilt would be lower than that. But at this point, they don't get to. So this is, if you're looking at everything, familiarity, location, this being a home game, opponent, this is probably the most automatic game left on Missouri's schedule. I would say even more automatic than Georgia because that game's in Athens, even more automatic than A&M because A&M's a little bit more familiar with you. They've seen you before, all that. So this is the game probably the rest of the season that I think Missouri can least afford to lose. Now, once again, kind of taking a glance at those Big 12 SEC Challenge scores right now, and they aren't obviously there aren't a lot of games going on at this point. I think there are just 2 other games going on in this event right now. But Oklahoma is now leading Alabama 55-43, and there's only 9.5 minutes left in that game. So what's that mean? Well, what that means, guys, is that an Oklahoma team that right now in the Big 12 is, let me see, I think they're in like 4th place. I'm going to have to look at it. I'm sorry, they're in 3rd. So, like, they're a good team, but they're 6-3. 3rd place in the Big 12 is kind of taking it to the team that hadn't lost in SEC play. I know we like to take shots at the Big 12, but Oklahoma is ranked 24th. It is one of 6 ranked teams in the Big 12. This is a league that, I mean, it's tough. And if the SEC's best team, and I think it's hard to argue that Alabama's anything but that, is losing to Oklahoma, then I think that's probably tells you kind of what the gap is between these leagues. And as we look at, kind of the rest of those matchups, I mean, Texas A&M, Kansas State, we don't even talk about that. We don't care. Iowa State's playing Mississippi State later. We don't care about that one either. But TCU plays Missouri. Missouri has to win that game. I mean, you're talking about the 2nd place, 3rd place team in the SEC against the 8th place team in the Big 12. Texas Tech, LSU is pretty interesting. Now, Texas Tech is 4-4 in the Big 12. So technically tied for 6th right now, but yet they're ranked 10th in the country. So that could be interesting. Oklahoma State plays Arkansas, both kind of middle of the road teams in their league. Kansas right now is 5th in the Big 12, plays Tennessee, which is in the SEC theoretically, I mean, tied for 4th, along with, in 4th alone, just ahead of Missouri, which is 5th. But I think we all think that's one of the better teams in the league. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in some of these matchups. And it'll be interesting also kind of at the end of this regular season, who has played how many games and what it means for the postseason. And I want to talk about that for just a minute before letting you guys hear from Akonzo Martin yesterday, because some of you have probably already seen it or read it. But I think Konzo's press conference from yesterday is well worth watching and much more worthwhile than me talking for 17 more minutes. But Jared Kluba says the Big 12 is always a very tough conference, 5 or 6 teams in the top 25. I definitely agree with that. Adam updates everybody that Bama's back to within 6. Bama can put up points in a hurry, so that game is not over. But Alabama has been trailing OU the entire time. But anyway, postseason and what all of this means. John Rothstein tweeted out yesterday that conference tournaments are going to be discussed, and the possibility of teams opting out is going to be discussed in the next 7 to 10 days by the NCAA. And you're saying opt out. Why would anybody opt out? Well, the NCAA tournament, they came out with the protocols a couple days ago about everything you need to do and all that. Everybody's obviously playing in Indianapolis. It's basically a giant bubble this year. But teams have to test negative for 7 straight days to play in the NCAA tournament. And so if you're Missouri, if you go into the SEC tournament pretty much knowing you're going to be an NCAA tournament team, at least that's what we expect as of today. We understand things can change. But anyway, assuming at the end of the regular season, Missouri knows it's playing in the NCAA tournament. Haven't played there in the last 3 years. Nobody on this – I think Mitchell Smith, the only guy who's ever played in an NCAA tournament game on this roster, maybe. That's not true. Tillman did as well. But not very many. You've been to tournament once in 7 years. You haven't won a tournament game in a decade. Do you want to put that at risk to go play like South Carolina and Mississippi State and Nashville? Because what happens if you go down there and there's an outbreak at the tournament, or you have a guy get exposed somehow on that trip, and then he can't play in the NCAA tournament? I mean, it makes no sense for any team that's in position to get a bid to the NCAA tournament to play in its league tournament. So we'll see what happens with that over the next couple weeks. I think everybody is still expecting those tournaments to happen, but I think it's far from a sure thing. And as I said, John Rothstein tweeted out we should know more about that in the next couple weeks. We've got 22 minutes till tip-off. So what I'm going to do to make sure I leave time at the end to come back and kind of wrap things up here and lay out the schedule for you. Once again, the game is on ESPNU at 1. But what I want to do now, I want to play you Cuonzo Martin's press conference from yesterday. The first 6.5 minutes are all about basketball and this matchup and this and that, and so I think that's worth hearing. The last 11 minutes are 3 questions about Cuonzo taking the team to some of those social injustice and civil rights museums between the Tennessee and Auburn games last week. It is Cuonzo spoke passionately. He went on a long time, and I think it's pretty interesting stuff. It's not what we usually do here. It's not what college basketball coaches usually talk about. Again, I know some of you have seen this. Some of you have heard it already, but for those who haven't, I think it's well worth hearing, and even if you have, I think it's well worth hearing again. So here's Cuonzo Martin from yesterday. Then we'll come back and wrap things up before tip-off.
Coach, hope you're well. I'm curious how you hammer home the importance of making free throws and getting to the free throw line when you have that opportunity.
It's just simply that they're free shots, take your time, relax, shoot the ball. But it's not – we don't have a 30-minute meeting about, free throw shooting outside of practicing free throws, your game routine, that sort of thing. And if you're speaking specifically on Tillman, he normally has a routine, obviously, because of our schedule. He didn't get the time in the gym, but he got his shots in yesterday and the day before.
Mitch?
So a few guys have talked about, the importance of finishing better at the rim. I know that's something you touched on in the postgame after Auburn. When you went back and watched the film, what was kind of the things you felt like could be corrected to make that better?
Finishing at the rim, just very similar to when we played, Tennessee the first time here, when you got guys that, block shots around the rim, you got to focus on the target. And we spent a lot of time focusing on the target, put it off the glass. If you're a dunker, dunk the ball. If not, utilize the glass. Now you don't really get consumed with whether or not a guy's blocking your shot. And I think that was the biggest thing as we got to the rim, not focusing on the target because they do have shot blockers. But again, when you see how we were finishing, not going strong, not aggressively, not using your shoulders in the way we practice, and that's the result of it.
Bill Pollock?
Yeah, good morning, Cuonzo. Just big picture, what's the one area of your game, X's and O's, that you've been impressed with? And then what area do you see as the biggest for growth at this point in the season?
mean, I think I'm trying to find a way to answer that question, but biggest growth, I just think consistent execution as a team. And I think for us, like the first half of Tennessee and some first halves of games, we got, especially the first 5 minutes, get off to a good start and just really doing what we practice. I think that's the biggest thing. When we get ourselves in a situation, you watch that first 5 to 7 minutes, and it's the translation of what we've practiced, who we are, let it resonate in the game, and then whatever happens after that, let it take its course, because we scout opponents, how certain teams come out and play. And nobody has come out in the game differently than when we scouted them initially. Obviously, people make adjustments. So for us, it is doing what we do in practice, let that carry over. Then when we have to make adjustments, we'll make the necessary adjustments. But we can't go out in games and doing stuff that we're not accustomed to doing, or four of the guys on the floor are not accustomed to seeing.
Gabe?
Konzo, I think Jeremiah had 6 or 7 blocks last night. And that's something he's added a little bit for being a guy his size. It's not something he's done a lot before this year. Where's the growth there? And I mean, is there a skill to becoming a shot blocker beyond being 6'10"?
I think it is a skill. I really do. And for him, we've always talked about making plays on the ball, trying to block shots, making plays on the ball. But there's also a feel, because you don't have to try to attempt to block every shot because of his size. People think he's coming to block shots. So now I'm just being big. And he's not a guy that's a charge taker. So you don't want your big guys in most cases taking charges. So just having instincts, and it's very delicate because he's a guy that's been foul prone throughout his career. So now all of a sudden it's like, let's be careful with this, but just really jumping high, stand down on shot fakes. Because I think there was probably only one foul in maybe the last 4 or 5 games in my mind that I thought he didn't have the discipline on. We played at Tennessee, and Ferguson had him in the lane. He's got him up in the second half. But other than that, I thought he's been sound defensively with his assignments. And even when he's making plays on perimeter, guys shooting jump shots. I think he got a couple fouls, just jumping straight up. And he's gotten better at that. But I think it's, some guys does it naturally, but I think in his case, it's been a developed skill.
Dave?
Hey, Konzo, what stands out about this TCU team that Jamie has this year?
Oh, they played well. Even though they came up short, I thought they played well last night against Kansas. Moved with a good pace. I think they moved with a better pace. Got up and down a little bit more than they had in the past this year, meaning they have 2 really good guards. They have other guys that can make shots and make plays. They have a big guy that's, seals you down at 6'11", knows how to seal. How to get angles. They go inside to him. He knows how to finish around the rim. And, Jamie's team's always tough, hard-nosed. They're gritty. They play at a high level. They compete and they share the ball. So, again, it's for us really controlling the tempo, not allowing their 2 guards to play with a lot of comfort on the perimeter, and making their big guys work for post touches and post baskets.
Eric? Konzo, not a question directly about the team, but I had the pleasure of speaking with Chase the other day. How did him come walking on to Purdue come about? And then is it weird looking over to West Lafayette and seeing your son wearing 22?
Man, Eric, how'd you get his number?
I contacted Purdue and asked to speak to him.
No, he's for him, and like my oldest son, Josh, he chose to go to Purdue. It was between Purdue and Cal, and it was his choice. And actually, when he made that decision, we were in California. We wanted to go to Cal Berkeley, but he chose that. And then in Chase's case, he had other opportunities, some Ivy League opportunities, but I think he wanted to be at Purdue. And I think for him, it's just he knows the staff. He grew up around those guys. Matt Payne was a teammate of mine. Brandon Brantley was a teammate, like a brother to me. And then the director of operations is my wife's side of the family is in the state of Indiana. My nephew just graduated from there. So and he grew up he was born in West Lafayette. So, all of that. And it's a good engineering school. I think that had a lot there. I think it's for him more the basketball. For me, it was probably engineering and my wife. But, it's his decision, man. You have to find your way. He was under our umbrella for 18 years, and now he had to spread his wings and fly, and then let the chips fall where they may. But I think he's in a good place, and it's part of being a man. I think get away and grow a little bit.
Jack?
Konzo, you took the team to the EJI Lynching Memorial, the Legacy Museum, and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery on the road trip. I'm just wondering why you took the team to those places and what you guys gained from it.
Good question. For me, I think just in society with COVID, we all had a chance, meaning you guys as well. We all had a chance in society to pause, reflect what's good, bad, just in your personal life, how can you become better as a person in your relationship, whatever that is in your job. And I just think for me, it's like when you have time, we go on these road trips, and I was doing as a college player, then as a coach, assistant coach now here. Never did those things unless they were mandatory. Like if you're on tournaments and you go see this site, and just you start to think, man, what are we really doing? You know, what are we really teaching our guys? I mean, you have to give them life experiences. I just felt like there was an opportunity. Like I said to Paul before the season, who's our director of operations before the season started, anytime we have opportunities to see events, not just, African American, it could be anything that culturally where we can grow from. Let's try to do that because I think we owe it to our players. And it's amazing how you sit back and talk to the guys after, and as players, there's things that they say, I didn't know that. I had no clue about that. But it's American history, but they had no clue about it. And they're taught American history in schools. That is a part of American history. And it was really tough for me, walking through there because, oftentimes when you come from areas like me, come from East St. Louis, you get information from your grandparents and it's passed down from what they experienced or moving from the South to the Midwest or wherever you come from the South to the West Coast and all those things. And so you hear about it. And then as you get older, I've never experienced any of that, I've had snippets in certain locations, but just to go in that facility, everybody was speechless. And normally after those events, we'll get together as a team that night, say, guys, what do you think about this? I had nothing in me to speak about it just because life can't be hard for me. I'm grateful to be in this position. And there were a lot of people back then that not living today as ancestors who did a lot of things, made a lot of sacrifices, lost lives for me to be sitting in this position right now today. So I don't take that for granted. I've never took that for granted. But just some of the horrific things, like you see a 12-year-old kid who's in solitary confinement, who's spending the rest of his life in a cell with no windows and maybe an hour of daylight for the rest of his life, or a young man who's 15 years old get put into prison with adult men. And I don't want to be graphic here, but you raped and brutalized for years. I mean, and then you find out what was the crime. That was a crime? And that's consistent. Then you talk about all the lives that were lost that we never found out about, or you even talk about the hangings on public display like it's a party, like we're in a downtown, let's go look at the light show. And then that's a postcard that's sent all around the country. And that's normal. Oh man. That's tough. That's tough. And then, okay, we shift from that, and we got to figure out another way. So let's build these prisons up. Let's turn these prisons into $80 billion industries. That's another way to shift it. And I'll read something to you guys, and this is on the wall. A presumption of guilt has been assigned to the Black people. A presumption of guilt has been assigned to the Black people. In most cases, they're always guilty until proven innocent. Even if proven innocent, I still do a little time. And can you imagine living life like that your whole life? Can you imagine you're on a plantation and they take your child away from you and you'll never see that child again? I mean, each one of you guys, if you guys have families right now, if you got children right now, I'm coming to take your child right now and you'll never see him or her again. That's pain. And I got to live with that. I'm scarred for the rest of my life. And I got to live with that. But I got to get up at 5 in the morning and go to work. I got to still go out and go to work until dusk to dawn. That's real pain. And I got it every day until they put me in the casket. And the best chance I got to get to survive is to run. Because maybe death is probably a little bit better. That's pain. That's every day. like Jeremiah said, it brought him to tears, and it just had me. I mean, just so I'm prayerful that we can get to a point in our society we can be better. We don't have to agree upon everything. We don't. That's the beautiful thing about life, society, making your own decisions, democracy. I don't have to agree with what you agree with. But if that's the best thing for all walks of life, then it's the best thing for everybody.
Got time for a few more guys. Dave?
Conzo, kind of touching on that. I mean, this has been quite a year going back to last summer and everything, and you've been able to share so many things with your players. And how different has that experience been? Can you get closer with the team when they're talking about such big world national topics that are outside of the realm of the sport?
I mean, good question, but for me, I never really try to do it to get close to them. And my job is, I don't think it's for them to really like me. Now, do I love all of them? Yes, and I don't like them all the time because of some stuff they do, miss class. So that's part of it. That's just like being a parent. The guys don't play, they upset with me. Sometimes parents might be upset with me because their child didn't play. All that's part of it. That goes to the territory. But I don't do those things for them to validate me as a good guy. Or coach is cool. I like coach. That's not why I do. I do it because I have to give it to them. I owe that to them to give them this. Oftentimes you think in college, what are we really teaching them? Think about the stuff that you learned at college, and then all of a sudden what you learn when you got out of college. And you paid to go to that university. There's a lot of stuff I think we need to be teaching while in school. And it has to be, college should be uncomfortable. It should be uncomfortable education. That's how you grow. I learned all that stuff K through 12. Now I'm an adult, start teaching me those things, life. So I'm ready for life. Probably 70% of athletes, and I say all walks of life, all colors, are not prepared when they leave college. And I just got a degree. I just walked away with a degree. I just walked across the stage. I want that life education. That life education. So when pain hit, I'm prepared for pain. Struggle hit, I'm prepared for struggle. Because that's life. That's real life. And that's what I try to prepare guys for, that life of it's going to be uncomfortable, sometimes painful. And tomorrow is not guaranteed. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with one of your teammates struggles to make ends meet, and you knew him 10 years ago and you saw him 15 years later struggling to make ends meet, he's homeless. How do you deal with that? You help him out? Or you say you should have went to class? Or what? How do you deal with that? That's life. That's going to happen. How you deal with a guy you coach and all of a sudden, coach, can you loan me $100? $100, you got a degree. How do you deal? That's real. That's life stuff. How do you help them understand, man? You know, you can start your own business in college. You can start a lawn service now. You can start a cleaning service right now. You can do that. Assets, liabilities. I need the real assets and liabilities, not that one I took in class with that stat class where I really struggled in the econ class. I really struggled in. Give me the real so I can make a living with this stat. You know, that's what we have to help them with. And this is so hard because oftentimes they don't see it. And how do you get them to understand life is hard? And that's what I tell my sons all the time. Life is hard, man, and I'm not always going to be here. But I hope you take these lessons I taught you over and over and over again. Because when you brace yourself for tough blows, I think you got a chance to survive in life. You got to be ready for tough blows.
All right, Gabe, got about a minute left before he has to hit the film, so.
Okay, I'll be as quick as I can. But Konzo, listening to you, and not just today, but over the last few years, talk about things like this and life things off the court. It's obvious. I know a lot of coaches say, "Hey, I get into coaching to help kids, and not so much wins and losses." But how do you balance that part of it with the fact that you are judged on winning and losing basketball games? And I know it doesn't have to be one or the other, but how do you keep that balance in your day-to-day life?
I don't worry about it. I'm not sure how other guys do it. If they fire me, I'll shake Jim Sturck's hand. I'll give him a hug because I think Jim's a good man. And appreciate it, Jim. I go and live my life because it's business. It's just the painful part of this, if there's pain, you develop relationships. And I think Jim's a good man. So if Jim had to come and say, "Coach, this is not going to work," appreciate your time, Jim. I thank you for the opportunity. I'll move on. You never hear see from me again. That's it. That's part of it. And so I don't worry about me losing a job. I got a great wife. God bless me with beautiful children. I'm winning the game. I'm not a guy that spends a lot of money. I got enough money to live the rest of my life, it's not like I have a lot. So I don't need all that. As long as I got the people around me, the family, the love, I'm good. Again, you understand, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma at 26 years old. I didn't think I was gonna make it. I came from East St. Louis. I done seen humble beginnings. I mean, God trained me with less, so I know how to survive. So you talking about somebody losing a job, that's not even when I'm out there. Man, you can do what you got to do because this universe is gonna be here when I'm dead and gone. It's just, but I'm gonna live a heavenly life while I'm on this earth. I'm not waiting to get to heaven to live in heaven. I'm living it right now. That might not look like us. I'm got a scowl all the time, but hey, I'm enjoying life. Best believe that. And as long as my family's healthy, we happy. I'm winning the game. I don't care what the scoreboard says. Thank you, guys. Enjoy your day.
All right, so I thought that was worth playing again. Maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't. By the comments, it looks like maybe a couple people hadn't seen that from yesterday, so I thought it was worthwhile. Look, basketball is important to a lot of people. Winning and losing games is important to a lot of people. I get that. There are other things that are important too, right? Probably a little bit more important. So I thought it was worth playing. Conzo there. A couple quick notes before Mizzou and TCU again tip off in about 2-3 minutes here on ESPNU. Couple quick notes for you from that. As I posted in the chat comments, looked up the stat broadcast before about 15 minutes ago. Javon Pickett replacing Mark Smith in the starting lineup. The other four are the same: Kobe Brown, Jeremiah Tillman, Xavier Pinson, Drew Smith, but Pickett in place of Mark Smith, first change to Missouri's starting five all season long, coming in game number 14. One other thing, Mitchell Forty has a thread posted on our message board. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey in Columbia today. He's gonna be watching the game. Mitchell and a few other people had a chance to talk to Sankey for a few minutes beforehand. He'll have a full story later, but here are the highlights. As of now, the opportunity still exists to make up every men's basketball game that's been canceled, but you have to be prepared not to get every game in and be okay with it. Still anticipates having an SEC tournament. That SEC tournament will be based on winning percentage during the regular season. So that means, hey, maybe you finish, 11-5 versus 10. I can't do it in my head. 12-6, right? 12-6 is technically a better record, more wins, but 11-5 is a better winning percentage. So that's how they're going to seed it. He didn't really address teams opting out, but says the conference remains committed to competition. They anticipate having an SEC tournament. He was asked when to expect full stadiums again. He said he hoped next year, but didn't want to make any guarantees. Again, Mitchell will have a full story with Greg Sankey's comments. Just wanted to add that on there real quick before we go. So Mizzou and TCU, within a couple minutes here, again, on ESPNU. After the game, I will jump on Conzo Martin's Zoom call. I'll record it. I'll upload it. We'll jump back on here for the Burger Smokehouse Dance Class post-game show. So hope to see you guys here in a couple hours. Thanks for joining us. Before you leave, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. You'll get a notification when we go live post-game. Mizzou and TCU coming up on ESPNU. Make sure to follow Mitchell Forty on Twitter. Check out all his coverage on Power Mizzou during and after the game, and I will see you in a couple hours.